Hi, this is Kermit the Frog.
Fascinating.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Magic is always there, as long as we keep looking for it.
Engage.
What does God need with a starship?
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
I protest. I am not a merry man.
Places, please. And here we go.
Down at Fraggle Rock.
Welcome, Doozers, Gorgs, Romulans, Trash Heaps, and Things to episode 128 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Jarman.
And I'm Steve. As always, we're on a journey across the stars to compare and contrast the creative worlds of Gene Roddenberry and Jim Henson.
And what started as reviews of The Muppet Show and Star Trek the original series has expanded into outer space.
And this week we have Fraggle Rock episode, The Preachification of Convincing John, and Next Generation episode, Neutral Zone.
Preachification, yes.
The Preachification.
But before that, Steve, I want to rock.
Yeah. Well, this is That Rocks. They're all kind of gems, jewels, and geodes in the world, many of which can be found in Fraggle Rock, including maybe amblygonite. I think I got that right.
Sure.
These pale yellow gems don't often appear in jewelry, but they are coveted by collectors, especially when they're in darker shades of yellow. They were first discovered in Saxony, Germany in 1817, but are now mostly mined out of the San Diego area in California. These gems are really low on both the hardness and toughness scales, so cutting them is really tricky, and keeping them in good shape is even trickier. Most of the care instructions read like they're for a really overly needy dog. They have to be kept separate from other jewelry, and don't polish them too rough, cloth only, no rings, brooches and pendants with protective settings only. So yeah, that's amblygonite, and That Rocks.
That rocks.
I want to rock!
Speaking of rock, let's figure out what's going down in Fraggle Rock. First, we start with What's Up, Doc? Doc is making breakfast, pulverizing coffee beans one at a time with a hammer. He reminisces about his diary that he finds, and he wonders about how to sew a button on a fried egg. Doc agonizes over this thought instead of feeding his poor dog, who is desperately hungry. Doc solves the fried egg dilemma and then gives the egg he's been messing with to Sprocket as his breakfast. It's like a final insult. Down in Fraggle Rock, Moki is writing in her own diary. She writes about Doozer observations and how the Fraggles callously destroy their work. We get a lovely song from Moki called Why, where she contemplates sort of the big questions of life while watching the Doozers toil at their work. She then tries to convince her other friend Fraggles that eating Doozer constructions is wrong, and she threatens to invoke the Great Oath of the Fraggle, in which when one calls, all must answer it and swear to it, and only the person who called it can release them. They vow to never willfully destroy Doozer constructions again. Gobo and Wembley go to get Uncle Traveling Matt's postcard with no resistance, so we'll talk about that later. Moki is outraged when they absentmindedly start eating some Doozer works, and Moki decides to bring all Fraggles to heel and brings in Convincing John. A Fraggle that is so convincing that he could convince someone to wear cups on their hands, as he does with Moki shortly. The Fraggles all convene, and Convincing John in a song convinces them to give up Doozer Towers. He uses fear-mongering to get the Fraggles to do his bidding. And the Fraggles, and they clarify this is all the Fraggles in the world, all vow to give up Doozer constructions and eating them. Sometime later, the Doozer constructions have taken over Fraggle Rock. Things are getting crowded, and the Fraggles call a meeting to try to force Moki to absolve them from their oath, but Moki refuses and leaves Fraggle Rock instead. She goes and finds a Doozer family, but they're sad because they have to move out of Fraggle Rock because the Fraggles just stopped eating constructions. Now they got to go. The Fraggles reconvene, and Moki, seeing the error of her ways, releases them from their vow. Convincing John reprises his musical manipulation, and the Fraggles go into a feeding frenzy and eat to their content. And that's what went down in Fraggle Rock. Jarman, what'd you think of this episode of Fraggle Rock?
Oh, I love at the end, their distended bellies, because they ate so much. Yep. They're just laying on the ground. Oh, I ate so much constructions. I also like how they were before they're going to take the oath, like Gobo and Red and stuff, they are humming the Fraggle Rock theme in the background. And I love the Doozers, as we know, and so this is a Doozer heavy episode. What a doozy of a Doozer.
Great Doozer episode.
Yeah. And that poor little child Doozer, he's like, Mommy, why do we have to leave? It's just so sad and cute.
Yeah, it is.
And Convincing John's song, definitely, I mean, I think it was a throwback to the Music Man pool song. The pool tables,
you know? Without a doubt.
Yeah, he's like fear-mongering the town. They have to get rid of this thing because it's going to lead to the pool, you know, it leads to everything else. But yeah, this episode was adorable. And Doc is getting even more neurotic because, like you said, he's not feeding his dog. He's trying to sew buttons on eggs. I mean, are there dead bodies in this guy's backyard? I don't know what's going on here.
There definitely are. That's the other diary, the one he didn't find.
The secret diary. You want to read that one, dog? Oh, Sprocket. But yeah, I love this expansion of the relationship between the Doozers and Fraggles and their delicious constructions. Mm-hmm. I thought the opening song was really nice. Just I felt for how slow it is, it went like maybe one verse too long, but it was
I can get that.
It kind of dragged a little bit, but otherwise, his Convincing John song was great. The Oath song was great. A++ episode for me.
Yeah, my favorite moment was still when they're like, "We, all the Fraggles in the world, do solemnly vow." And I was like, okay, cool. They're just covering that base.
Well, they know how many of them are. They're only in this rock, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. You could count that frame and just know how many Fraggles there are, assuming that they're all in frame.
That's all of them. They're magical creatures.
No, I really enjoyed this episode. This is one of my favorites from when I was a kid. Doozers, and then like you're right, them doing the oath was so iconic, and them expanding it then and growing the stakes. It's not just her friends now. Everyone has to do it. If anything, I wish we'd gotten more Gorg, but you know, there will be plenty more Gorg.
Oh yeah. There was no Gorg
episode.
At all.
No Gorg. There was like a mention of them.
Or trash heap. Yeah.
No trash. So like maybe if it had those one or two things, it would like round into like a truly just delicious episode. So maybe it didn't quite get there, but Convincing John makes up for all of it.
Yeah, he was pretty great.
Makes up for all of it.
I love how there's always these, like, each episode, she gives us another Fraggle we didn't know about before, who's like, there's a fireman, and then there was like the stick guys for water, you know, like people that we don't know exist in this little world, but they show up in each episode.
So this one is, I mean, one of the better of the season. I don't think I've had any episodes that I've had like a major issue with.
Yeah, nothing outright bad so far. It's just like
nothing outright bad.
There's been like little things nitpicky here and there, but like otherwise been pretty solid so far. Unlike the Star Trek first season of Next Generation,
which has really had some ups and downs, which we're going to talk about when we get to our top three and bottom three.
That's right.
So let's see. What are those silly creatures up to this week? Well, Uncle Traveling Matt out in the silly creatures world encounters giant doozers and their constructions, which are actually construction workers in a scaffolding. He tries to eat their scaffolding, thinking it is a giant piece of food, only to find it is not as easy as doozer constructions. Mm-hmm. This week, all the people working had hard hats on. So hard hats came out in early shipbuilding, where workers would cover their hats in tar and then let them harden in the sun to protect their head from people working above them. And then in the late 1800s, a guy named E.D. Bullard, who was an owner of a industrial safety equipment company, sold leather-covered hats to miners, and then his son went into World War I and came back with one of their metal helmets, and it changed his whole approach. So then in 1919, Bullard introduced the hard-boiled hat, was what it was called, and the U.S. Navy asked him to make a special version of them for their shipyard workers, and that is when like the modern hard hat was born, where it became the standard. It was once the U.S. Navy started using it. In the 1930s, hard plastic versions were developed as electrical workers became more prevalent, and having a giant steel pot on your head wasn't great for that, as it turns out.
Nope.
But since then, they are made in aluminum, fiberglass, molded plastic. They can reduce crazy heats up to hundreds of degrees. Some of them are shock resistant, depending on the workers and what they need, and they continue to be improved. And so that's hard hats, and that's what those silly creatures were up to this week.
I always loved the Jerry Seinfeld joke from forever ago, where he says, humans are really smart, you know, instead of stopping the activities that are continually cracking their skulls, They just created a helmet.
We made a hat to keep it all in there.
Yeah, exactly. You don't stop the dangerous activity. Just put something on your head to protect your head. Your already dumb brain that can't protect itself.
So, Sherman, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week?
The huge number with Convincing John was awesome and everything.
God.
But my favorite I'm going to go with, which is a little weird and kind of off kilter here, is just the production member team that had to create all of those Doozer creations. And it's just probably by hand putting those things together, like tons and tons and tons of pieces. And to be the Muppeteer, the puppeteer who gets to be the Fraggles at the end, who just get to destroy all of it and eat all of it. Then there's clearly Doozer constructions that additionally get built special ways when they have to break away in their mouth. Yeah.
Like little pieces,
so long.
so that they can just Cookie Monster that shit.
Exactly, just like and drop it,
Yeah,
but just to be the puppeteer at the end, just get to destroy all that shit would be so fun.
Yeah.
That just stuck out to me.
I love Convincing John. This is one of the songs that like I always will have in my head forever.
It's a patter song.
Between the mix of a preacher, like a evangelical preacher mixed with James Brown, as far as like, he'll be ready. And then like at the end, he falls and collapses. Like that's very James Brown. So just that mix and just Jim going out with energy and showing like why he was the man.
Oh, so he played Convincing John?
That is Jim.
Ah, gotcha.
Who did do a bunch of standalone voices on Fraggle Rock, but was never a full blown cast character.
He's probably
because he was doing too many things at that time. Yeah. But I think he still was an executive producer and oversaw huge chunks of Fraggle Rock. But we get him in roles like Convincing John.
That's a nice bit of trivia there.
Yeah, that's right. So, Jarman, what happened on this week's final episode of season 1 of Star Trek: The Next Generation?
So for this time around, as Steve knows, I had a hard time getting all my prep done before this episode. So I was like, oh, crap. The one thing I didn't get to finish was the summary of the episode. So we let wonderful ChatGPT do it. And I told it to be funny, which oftentimes ChatGPT gets confused when you say make something funny and it just adds the word funny or hilarious.
I feel like that might be your downfall here. The fact that you gave it flavor might be what really botches it.
Have a personality, robot.
Yeah.
So in the neutral zone, this is what it says. The crew of the Enterprise stumbles upon a centuries-old spaceship with 3 cryogenically frozen humans from the 20th century. As they wake up to the future, hilarity ensues, with one of them more interested in finding his lost money than the fact that he's in space. Meanwhile, Captain Picard has to deal with a tense standoff with the Romulans, who are just as grumpy as ever. In the end, the crew learns that sometimes the biggest challenge isn't alien diplomacy, it's explaining to people from the past that they missed a lot. So that missed quite a bit of stuff that was in the episode. We have 3 people.
A little.
We have 3 people who are cryogenically frozen. One was a stay-at-home mom. One was a musician who had basically froze themselves when they died, and so that they could come back in the future to hopefully be healed. And they from like 1994, I think is what they're established to have been from during the wars, I guess would have been the Star Trek timeline. But they basically have a hard time adjusting to the ship and figuring out there's no currency. They've missed so much. Their family's dead. But at the same time, this is a very important episode because it reintroduces the Romulans for the first time, where we get to encounter them and haven't seen them since the original series. And they mentioned this in canon in the episode, saying it's been, 50 years since they've actually encountered the Romulans, since they established this neutral zone separating them. And so these outposts have been destroyed, supposedly. So the Enterprise is checking them out to see what happened to them. And it seems as if they were just lifted and gone or evaporated. So some kind of huge technology must have destroyed them because there's not even any sign of them left. And they find out that the Romulans also had the same thing happen to outposts on their side of the neutral zone. And they didn't think it was the Federation because they didn't have that kind of technology. But so they kind of have established a cooperation, not an alliance, to figure out what caused these things to happen. And then it kind of ends on a very quick note where nothing really climactic happens at the end. It's just like, we're going to be seeing more of the Romulans now, and we don't know what caused these destructions to happen. So it's kind of a mystery, kind of a little putter ending there. And that's our episode. So Steve, what'd you think of this one?
Okay. So some likes. It was fun seeing Picard gone at the beginning, and that's why this nonsense was able to happen at all.
That's true.
But I didn't like that. I hated that he wasn't gone the whole episode. Like, I know that sounds dumb, but this felt like it could have been a good, just the rest of the crew dealing with this shit episode.
Yeah.
And so it would have made the stakes a little lower because they would have been dealing with Riker. It would have made maybe the pitter pat ending not feel that sort of down. Mm-hmm. So I just no such luck that we didn't get that episode. And I thought it was really cool to get like a check in with the Romulans, which is still an unknown entity. I loved the idea, and this is maybe one of the best executed of reciprocal action, where it was like, whatever happens, the Romulans will not commit first. They will sit and wait, and they will wait for you to to act aggressive. Yeah. And so that was like an interesting thing. And so to watch Jean-Luc be, they're cloaked, blah, blah, blah. Should we arm? No, don't arm. Should we put up shields? No, don't put up shields. They're dropping their thing. They're going to fire on us. Do not put up shields.
But
do
Captain,
not fire.
The Romulans killed my family. Control your emotions, Mr. Worf.
Yeah, that was great. And so it just that aspect was very well executed through the episode and felt like true, like they stayed true to it. I liked the idea of both sides in unity against a common enemy. This did feel like such a waste that nothing was actually discovered.
Yeah, there's no button at the end of the episode just to be like, to really hook us in.
I mean, really, it came down to, that's why it felt like that pitter pat, because nobody had succeeded at anything.
Yeah.
It might have been real interesting to get this out of the way earlier and then have them investigate together
and make a big discovery,
succeed at something together. And when Picard mentions like, maybe this is the beginning of diplomacy, the guy's like, no, we've been gone. We're back now. There's no alliance. Like, then it would have played back on something they had done together, but that didn't happen.
There was no conflict that was resolved.
Yeah, nothing.
Like there was a encounter with the Romulans.
Not even a mystery really that was resolved.
Yeah,
they knew it was the Romulans.
You kind of like 101 screenwriting, have a big conflict that gets resolved by the end of the episode, and there was nothing. There was no conflict that was resolved. Yeah. So it was just two little mini conflicts here and there, but yeah, it just felt really odd.
I liked even the jerk rich guy sort of helped out with the Romulans. When he like comes to the bridge and interjects himself, he's like, they don't know. They're hoping you know. I did love the Data and Sunny interaction.
Yeah, the musician, cryogenically frozen guy. Yeah.
And then the smart plot choice that they made Sunny as likable as the other guy was a jerk in the middle. And then the woman was like the wide-eyed wanderer of the three.
And so they used the ship's counselor for what she's supposed to be used for. Like, yeah, this woman is crying and not adjusting to her new life. And so, hey, get the counselor. Like, that makes logical sense.
And there was something good and eerie about the Romulans' final message of, we've been busy, prepare to eat some shit. Like, there was something nice and menacing about that, but it didn't feel like we earned it. So some dislikes. Why did at the beginning they acted like Picard is a no nonsense dictator of a captain who hates people?
I did note that in my notes, that why is he acting like he doesn't care about these people's lives? Like, of course he would save them in any other circumstance. The frozen people, right. Like, he seemed like he didn't care about them. Like, why'd you save them, Data? Like, of course Data would save them. Like,
right. And so that just felt like, what? Why are you? Or like when they're like, okay, but when the captain gets here, we got to be ready to go. Like if they didn't explain they found bodies or something, Picard would be like, give me an update. We need to leave soon. And that would be,
yeah,
which is what happened basically. Do we ever find out who destroyed the outposts?
I think we do, yes.
My initial thought is Borg, but that seems too not correct. But we'll see.
I think we find out on the first or second episode of next season.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I said no major movement in the episode plot-wise, as we kind of discussed. And then I wish we'd gotten the Romulans earlier so we could have more time to develop this situation.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, or at least like handled the situation better, because there were good scenes in there and good writing for the Romulans, but just didn't land very well because it was just so anticlimactic and just, I don't know. But there is kind of a reason for that into our Trek facts. This was hit with the writer's strike. So in the writer and directors guilds for the series, Writers and Directors Guide for the series, written by Gene Roddenberry prior to the first season, Romulans were covered by one of the main writing rules, which stated no stories about warfare with Klingons and Romulans, and no stories with Vulcans. We were determined not to copy ourselves and believe there must be other interesting aliens in a galaxy filled with billions of stars and planets. But following the perceived failure of the Ferengi as the main villains of TNG by the production staff, the Romulans then became more of a villain during the early parts of this series because they're like much more intimidating, much more interesting. The attacks the Romulans complain about of the outposts dangled as an unresolved plot device for quite some time, but there was a plan. Producer Maurice Hurley had meant this episode to compose part of a trilogy in which the Borg would be formally introduced. The opening episode of the second season further explored matters, including a possible alliance between the Federation and the Romulan Empire to counter the new threat. But those plans were ruined by the 1988 Writers Guild of America strike. The Borg introduction had to wait until later. So they changed the whole plot of this entire episode, and they didn't get to finish this episode. The subplot regarding the time-displaced characters was added at the last minute after the cliffhanger angles of the plot had to be scaled back. So there was apparently much more to this cliffhanger, and it just had to be scaled back as a writer's strike. And they had already written this part about this. They were actually from a different episode, those frozen people. And since it was already written, they were able to conglomerate these two together to make a whole episode because the writers couldn't write anything new.
Now kiss.
Yeah, yes. The episode was a milestone in the history of Star Trek by establishing the first season of TNG took place in the year 2364. This was the first time an exact calendar date was provided for a Trek episode. The Kirk's timeline had been established as the 23rd century. That's all we kind of got in the Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. But other than that, we weren't sure because they used star dates, and no one knew what star dates meant at that point. And all Star Trek episodes, chronologies, novels, and background information since this episode have been calculated from this date. So it was
That's
very
crazy.
Yeah.
So in canon, this is like the point around which all timelines are built. That is crazy.
The role of Ralph Offenhouse, the rich guy who was crazy about money, was originally intended to be Harcourt Fenton Mudd. And the episode, yes, the episode would have been more comedic in nature. However, the guy who played Mudd, Robert C. Carmel, died before production of this episode could begin. And the Mudd role and the thrust of that episode was changed. So instead of it being people from Kirk's time and Mudd being one of the frozen people, it was just humans from 1994. But it could have been a Harry Mudd episode. That would have been so interesting.
I would have loved to get some Harry Mudd up in here, you know?
I know. And so in homage to that, though, he died of a cardiomyopathy, something in his heart. That was the cause of death of the rich guy, Ralph Offenhouse, that she mentions. So she gave him the same cause of death in the episode. But anyways, that's our little Trek facts there. What are our Trek connections this time around, Steve?
Oh, boy. Anthony James, who played Sub-Commander Thay, who, if you looked up, you'd recognize him from something, was in a movie called Soggy Bottom USA, which starred Don Johnson, who was in Django Unchained, which featured Christoph Waltz, who appeared as himself in the 2011 The Muppets when they're performing in Germany. And he does a waltz with Sweetum is in a dress. Christoph Waltz.
Oh my gosh.
Bam, 6 steps. Okay. Leon Rippey, who played Sonny, LQ Sonny Clemens, was in the movie 8-Legged Freaks with David Arquette, who played Daniel in the Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, and Dr. Tucker in Muppets from Space.
There you go.
And then Peter Mark Richmond, who played Ralph Offenhouse, the jerk. He has an IMDb page like 3.5 miles long. He did a voice for The Greatest Adventure, Stories from the Bible, an animated series, as did prolific voice actor Rob Paulsen.
Oh, yeah.
Rob Paulsen provided multiple voices for Fraggle Rock, the animated series, including Boober and Marjorie.
Ah, gotcha.
Bam, Trek connected. Well, makes sense because both these episodes are basically the same, right?
Absolutely.
Both feature seemingly opposing factions coming together, sort of, for a common goal, the Romulans and the Federations, to figure out what happened to their outposts, even though that's not actually what happened, and the Fraggles eating construction so that the Doozers can stay in Fraggle Rock.
I had almost the same thing. Both have someone out to stop an injustice, but it turns out not to be what it seems. Picard investigating the Romulans destroying the outpost, but it turns out they didn't do it. And Moki trying to get everyone to stop eating the Doozer constructions when it turns out the Doozers like it.
That's right. Both feature people making audacious demands. The rich asshole demanding to see the captain and be given a phone, and Moki demanding all the Fraggles stop eating Doozer constructions.
Both episodes feature frozen organic material, the cryogenically frozen people on Trek, and the Doc's frozen egg on Fraggle Rock.
Okay. Okay, you're not wrong.
It's the same episode.
Same episode. It's like the multiverse.
That's right. Oh, what's that sound? Oh, God.
Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
All right, it's the time of the episode where we take one character from one episode and we transport them to the other one, making them switch places like crazy. So what you got for us, Steve?
I'm going to bring over Sonny, the likable yokel, and just replace Convincing John, because I think him just being real likable, and he was a musician in his life, would like completely make sense for him to just be like, hey, y'all got to stop eating some some Doozer constructions.
I had the exact
same one. It ain't no thing
one.
but to do it.
I had the exact same one. It would go from like a patter song to having like some kind of country hillbilly song. Yeah.
And then I said, Rock to Trek, bring over Moki and replace Claire Raymond. And she would just sort of perfectly fit with the wide-eyed spectator role that Claire kind of filled.
Both really sweet people, nice.
And taking it in stride with the whole being resurrected and being in the future. I think Moki would fill that well.
Yeah, absolutely. From Rock to Trek, I'm having Convincing John replace Captain Picard because he would have the best diplomatic relations across the galaxy. Just Convincing John, stopping all wars with his great patter songs.
And stopping them from eating Doozer constructions.
They're like, what are Doozers?
Like the Federation intended.
Exactly. Oh, man. So that brings us now to our top three, bottom three of Trek for the whole season 1.
That's right. Somehow we made it through 26 episodes.
Oh, my gosh.
I guess 25 if you count the two-parter as one, but 26 episodes. So now let's talk about them. Do you want to start top or bottom?
Yeah, let's alternate some tops. Right. So my first one, I have Encounter at Farpoint.
Are these in any particular order?
No.
Mine aren't. Okay, good.
Okay, yeah, mine aren't either necessarily. But Encounter at Farpoint, not the best episode of Trek or even the best of this season, but it's getting to my top because it's a classic, and it's a pretty good story for being a first episode of a show. It gives you so much going on with Q, and you're introduced to all the characters, and it still has a good sci-fi story with the creature that's the part of that planet creating things, and it's being tortured, so they let it go. Like, it's got all the hallmarks of a good, solid Star Trek episode, and it's the first episode, so that's why it's on my top three.
For me, I'm going to say Data Lore. It was a great, big kind of world-building implication surrounding like the role of androids. I thought Brent Spinner just exquisitely depicted both Data and his brother as like perfectly separate characters and really balanced the episode well. So that's a win for me.
Yeah, that almost made my list too, because it's such a classic episode and he did a great job. And I'm gonna think it's Spiner, but I'm not sure. But I think it's Spiner. I don't know. I should know this.
Is it Brett or Brent?
Brett.
Brett Spinner
Brent
Spiner.
I think it's Brent Spiner. I don't know.
Okay, Brent Spiner.
And my second is a weird one, but looking back through all the episodes, I was like, which one did I really like and connect with? And I go by a lot with what has the Star Trek feels and hallmarks of like giving a good message. And I thought Symbiosis did a really good job with that. This is the one with the two different planets that are next to each other.
The drug addicts.
Yeah. And they don't know that they're just addicted to a drug. They think it's curing their plague or something. And just the typical great conundrum of sci-fi and Star Trek and like solving their problem without breaking the Prime Directive too bad, and just the navigating the bureaucracy of Federation at the same time. And I thought it was really good guest actors on that one. So yeah, that was one of my top three.
My next one, I'm going to say Conspiracy, the one that last week's episode. It was a huge departure thematically from the norm, and really, I thought, showed what Star Trek could be if it stretched a little.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to bet that it paved the way for some of the more extraordinary episodes we have coming.
Especially Deep Space Nine, even later. Like, a lot of it's more like conspiracy the whole time. Like, it's just it's great. My third one is also probably weird and going to upset people, but it always sticks out with me is Justice, which is the one where they go to the pleasure planet where everyone's super hot and sexy, and Will Wheaton steps in a flower and gets...
Yeah, Wesley fucks up, steps in a planter.
Yeah. I love this too for the same kind of reasons where it's like, oh crap, what do we do now? We have to deal with like their traditions, but not break the Prime Directive. And I just love... seeing Wesley get like trying not to stare at these girls' boobs the whole episode. And it's just basically him stepping on a flower. And I don't know. It's just that episode always stands out to me. And I remember it so much because it's such a good conundrum in Star Trek trying to be sexy. So yeah, Justice, my number 3. It's a weird choice.
In a similar theme, though, I picked my third because it's a good Wesley episode. And that's When the Bow Breaks, where the kids are kidnapped.
Oh, yeah. That was good.
But good Wesley episode with clever thinking, smart diplomacy, and like a science-derived ending. It exemplifies sort of what Star Trek should be about.
Yeah.
And you mix that with like sort of the fine balance of the kidnappers not really being the bad guys that we expected. And I thought it made for a very good and compelling episode.
I remember you liking that one a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So Datalore, Conspiracy, and When the Bow Breaks on my side.
An Encounter at Farpoint, Symbiosis, and Justice on my side.
Wow, no overlap. That's impressive. Now let's see if there's overlap down at the bottom of the pit.
It better be.
All right, I'll go first on this one. See what first last name. So my first one in the bottom is one that's on like a lot of people's like one of the worst, if not the most offensive. And that's Code of Honor. Yeah. Not only sexist and extremely out of touch in an episode that was clearly meant to highlight female empowerment. The costumes and racial depictions are also not great and based off of very stereotypical things. And the final climactic scene is stabby parkour on a kid's jungle gym. So overall, not a great episode.
That was my first one as well. So
that's right.
There you go. We have some overlap, and you described it in every way I could have described it. So that's it.
All right. So Too Short a Season's my second one. That's the one where it's the old Starfleet couple, and he has taken some sort of drug that makes him rapidly de-age.
Oh, yeah.
But the storyline was extremely choreographed because they refused to cast different age actors, and they just cast one old actor and put him in really bad old age makeup.
Oh, the young actor, yeah.
And it was just a clumsy and over allegorical episode that did not deliver.
I remember that one, yeah. I didn't hate it that much, but I do remember that being really annoying. That's like, just cast different actors. What the hell?
Yeah.
My second one, which was The Last Outpost, which was the crazy jumping around Ferengi episode, because it took all the credibility they were building up on season 1. They could have lost everything from that episode alone, because like, this is the villains they're going to give us. Oh my God. They're terrible and annoying and not scary at all.
Yeah, that one almost made the list.
Yeah.
But the whole episode wasn't bad until they showed the Ferengi.
Then they had the wizard guy and everything.
Yeah. But the Ferengi being like little rat monkey men, basically. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. But it was just below. This is like maybe spot 4. Yeah. My final one is The Arsenal of Freedom, where they go down the planet with the probe, and it ends up it's like on a demonstration reel for a weapons manufacturer that doesn't exist anymore. I thought the tension on the planet with the probes didn't mount and relied on them literally just shooting at it and then shooting at it more and better.
Yeah, that's true.
You mix that with the unconvincing setup of the captain of the USS Drake, who tries to trick Riker right off the bat. And just that leading nowhere and being so overt that it didn't do anything for the story. And then like weird romantic overtones with Picard and Crusher, but like while she's dying from blunt force trauma. The whole thing was just weird, and overall the episode was a letdown.
Yeah, and on the letdown front, I'm going to go with my third one as Angel One. which is when they go down to the matriarchal planet, and they had a real opportunity to really show, make some kind of message about feminism and about women empowerment once again, like with Code of Honor.
Yeah, Code of Honor. Just totally missed it.
Instead, they just totally missed it and made it really bad. They kind of made it look like this is a bad thing when women are in charge instead of actually the good message of it being and also Riker just using his sex. Once again, Bulge, we got to fix this. Come on, Bulge, let's go.
And it goes...
That's how it sounds. Whoa, Bulge, whoa.
Like that Ferengi Ratman. He's got a Ferengi Ratman there.
And that one, bad. The episode itself wasn't that terrible, except for the fact of what it was doing, which was failing completely at what it was supposed to be doing. So, that's why that wasn't made my list. So we had one overlap on that one.
There we go. So top 6, bottom 5.
Yeah, there you go.
Not too bad. Well, that just means that we're on to bigger and better things, right?
Oh, we so are. We get Riker with a beard.
Oh.
That's all we need. But that brings us to the end of episode 128 of the MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for Fraggle Rock episode, I Want to Be You.
And Next Generation series episode, The Child.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.